This chart right here is exactly why some people spend a short amount of time and get better really, really quickly, while other people spend a long amount of time and don't get that much better. And the secret is in feedback loops. I got this chart from a guy named Ray Dalio, who wrote a book called Principles that talks about this. And I've taken what he said and modified it just a little bit, but this is largely from him. He's a very, very smart guy. So check this out. On the y-axis, we have skill. Skill is simply how good someone is. On the x-axis, we have time, how much time someone spends doing the thing. And then if we look at the slope, we have the rate of skill development. And so that is why here we have the rate of skill development is much higher for this line than it is for this line. This is why you can have a senior in high school baseball player not be that good, while you have a 7th grader be unreal. And it is because their skill is better. Now, when we look at this, there's a few key things to understand. One is how tight the feedback loops are together. So you can see here, there's more space between these feedback loops. The more space that you have between the amount of feedback that you're getting, the slower that you're going to develop. And so this is why I believe online coaching is superior to in-person coaching, unless you're going like every day to a facility with some of the top coaches getting video feedback. Because in the traditional model of a 1 hour, once a week sports coaching lesson, what you have is you have these slow feedback loops where you have 6 days between the next piece of feedback that you get from a coach. Whereas in an online setting, you can get this 3 times a week or even every single day. Now on top of that, you don't only get the feedback from the coach, because guess what? You're videoing yourself. So the athlete is getting a visual of them actually doing the drill and reviewing it themselves. And then they get the coach giving feedback on it. And then now they know what to look for. And so their rate of learning just goes through the roof, especially if you have a well-designed program and you have a coach who's good at explaining good versus bad, helps the athlete understand. That athlete is now going to know what good versus bad looks like and is going to be able to self-correct moving forward because their rate of skill development is faster. Okay, so we talked about the length between the feedback loop and we talked about the slope of it, and how much tighter you get is often how much steeper you go. So with that being said, I want to break down what's actually inside of a feedback loop. So if you zoom in theoretically to the actual chart that we just looked at, well, what's inside each one of those loops? Well, again, I got this from Ray Dalio and I've modified it slightly. Basically, you have a goal, and with that goal, if you're a basketball player, maybe it's to improve your crossover or to improve your athleticism in your step back jumper or whatever it is. You have some goal, and then you have to do the thing, and then you reflect on it, and you ask yourself, well, what did I do well? And then you have to improve on it. You have to ask yourself, well, what can I do better? And then you have to plan of how can I actually do the thing better? Very simple. And then you have to go apply it. And the more feedback loops you get, the steeper that trajectory is of your growth, of your skill development. And that is the game changer. That's what separates people. And it might not separate you a ton at the beginning, but you can see even when we go back to this chart, you know, if we keep going here, this just keeps going further and further. The gap keeps getting bigger and bigger. So the longer the time horizon extends, the bigger the skill gap gets. And that's why if you can learn how to learn quickly in whatever it is, you will just make jumps that you wouldn't otherwise make. And that's why getting a coach can be so good, because a coach is going to help a basketball player identify the right things, put the right plan in place, and work on it consistently, and then give them the customized feedback that they need within that linear skill development path that's going to allow them to make skill jumps that they just wouldn't have the chance to make otherwise. So the longer we extend time here, the more the skill gap increases when you have continuous feedback and a coach who knows what they're doing. So right here, we zoom in. Now I want to take this idea of well, better, how, and help add an additional feedback loop for the athlete in their journaling prompt. And so again, I got this from Jason Selk, love his stuff. But basically what we do is we focus on what did we do well. Now you're gonna notice a pattern here of 3, 1, 1, 1. So there's 2 things that's really going on here. One is a thing called channel capacity. And channel capacity is the idea that you can focus on one thing at a time. I'm a little sloppy here, so forgive me. But one thing at a time. The idea is that if you have too many things that you're trying to communicate, they're just not going to get anything. And you've seen this in lessons that you've done. You've seen this in anything that you've ever tried to teach. If you try to teach more than one thing at a time, then it doesn't work. And that's why having that skill development is progressional idea is so important, because if you get the things in the right order, then you can knock them down one at a time, and then you can move really fast. But if you don't get it in the right order and you try to communicate 6 things at once, they won't make any improvements. They'll actually get worse. They'll go backwards, right? You've seen it if you're a coach, and it's the same thing for you as you're learning what you have to do. So channel capacity, that's why we have one thing here, here, here. So you might ask, well, why do we have 3 here? Well, the reason that we have 3 in well, I don't know if Jason Selk calls this that. The idea is that what we focus on grows. So if you think back to when you were playing a sport or when you were preparing for anything, and you go into that game, and before that game, theoretically, you watch a reel, like a highlight reel, but not of good highlights, of all the worst plays that you've made. The ground ball going through your legs, you dribble it off your foot and it goes out of bounds. You drop a pass that's literally hits you in the worst place possible, the hands, right? Just a highlight reel of all the errors and mistakes that you make, versus you go to another theoretical game and you watch a highlight reel of you hitting home runs, making diving plays, hitting the step back jumper coming around the screen, like hitting the slap shot into the net for a goal, like as you're getting hit, you know, like all the craziest plays. Which game would the athlete perform better in? Of course, the game where he's visualizing himself succeeding. But most athletes don't even reflect. And so when we think back to this, most athletes don't even do this. They don't even reflect. And so then that cuts the feedback loop off, and it doesn't allow them to complete the circle. But if they do reflect, they oftentimes leave out well, and they only focus on better. And what happens when we only focus on better is we get discouraged. Because if you can't see that you're growing and that you're making progress, then it becomes really, really difficult to stay motivated. And if we look at brain science and dopamine and all that fun stuff, much of it is based on pursuing a goal and feeling like we're making progress. It doesn't even matter how close we are to the goal, it matters that we're making progress towards it. And so when we journal like this and have the athlete focus on 3 things that they did well, we are intentionally training their brain to focus on the highlights, to focus on the progress, so that they see the momentum that they're building and it continues to propel them forward. So that is the journaling structure that I like to implement with all of my athletes. And it really comes from this one image where we have feedback loops creating significant space as time goes on from different athletes. Then we have the zoom in of to what actually the feedback loops look like, and we have well, better, how. And then finally we have the journal where we take well, better, how, and we actually apply that into the athlete and have him physically write it down or have her physically write it down. And then we have them visually reviewing the video feedback. And then we have the coach visually and audibly giving feedback on a remote training app. And then you get that multiple times a week, and it's just not even close. If you get a great teacher and you have the athlete do what that teacher says, if the plan is even remotely good and they're consistent about practicing and they're just improving a little bit every day, they're gonna blow by everyone else. It's not even close. My name is Anj Bourgeois. Let's win together.